Hello, I'm Lydia Talbot. Welcome to Sanctuary. Journey with us onto a sacred stage, a church, a theater, and an inspiring story about Silk Road Rising Theater Company housed inside the First United Methodist Church, Chicago Temple. A shared commitment to storytelling and justice. Today on Sanctuary.
What makes a stage sacred? I think it depends on how we define sacred and what is sacred to us.
My name is Phil Blackwell. I'm the senior minister at the First United Methodist Church here at the Chicago Temple. Early, I think in 2003, I began to get all these phone calls from someone named Malik, who was a complete unknown to me.
We were reaching out to area churches and synagogues to sell tickets to a play that I wrote called Precious Stones that we were producing at the Chicago Cultural Center.
Ultimately, I answered one of the phone calls. I became thrilled with the notion of how out of what was really the attack on 9/11 of a couple years earlier, the two of you, a Pakistani Muslim and a Syrian Orthodox Christian, could imagine that there could be something good coming out of that, which would be this commitment to storytelling about how it is we learn about each other by telling the stories that have shaped us.
We had a first meeting, which was really lovely, and we started to learn about the congregation, about Phil as the senior pastor, and what the Chicago Temple community is all about. I'd say we felt an immediate kinship.
And so as you were talking to me about what you wanted to do, I began to think of how it is that this church, because of our location and because of the availability of space and time, which is what we have to offer a lot of people in the city. What I remember is that after about an hour and a half, I offered you the basement for rehearsals.
We had what I would consider a typical church basement. We were at a point where we definitely needed to do some renovations for structural reasons, but also for aesthetic reasons. And you just say that God works in mysterious ways sometimes. We needed to renovate the church basement. Silk Road Rising needed a space. We worked out a wonderful arrangement.
The other thing that's maybe a little bit unusual here is that you're dealing with a church. You're dealing with a church that owns a property and has a set of principles and rules that govern the church. And at the same time, it's in tension with a very central aspect of any theater company, which is maintaining artistic freedom. The agreement's very clear that at no time, in no way, is the church dictating or controlling what the theater group is putting on. That's for the theater group to decide. Nobody knew when we put up the Chicago Temple building in the 1920s that we would be in the middle of the theater district and would be a part of it. Yeah. But what a wonderful thing. What a wonderful thing. It's a human institution. This isn't just, we build a nice institutional structure. The work happens at the human level, and the human beings working and dealing with each other on day-to-day problems and celebrating our successes.
This congregation is the oldest church in the city in terms of being founded in 1831. Which actually makes it older than the city itself, which was started in 1837. It was a frontier congregation, started in a log cabin north side of the river. When the city was founded on the south side, 6 years after the church, the congregation took the log cabin, put it on a barge, floated it across the Chicago River, rolled it down Clark Street on logs to this corner. So there's been a Methodist congregation at Clark and Washington since the 1830s. Methodists traditionally don't have temples, but the minister at the time, as they were moving toward designing what turned out to be the tallest church steeple in the world, and at the time of its conclusion in 1924, the tallest building in Chicago. The minister, John Thompson, said, when people come to Chicago seeking gold, they'll find God, and this will be the city's temple. So the name stuck to the building, and our identity is somewhat bifurcated. We're the First United Methodist Church, the name of the congregation, at the Chicago Temple.
The Chicago Temple and the United Methodist Church as a whole has a slogan that says, open hearts, open minds, open doors.
Well, one of the dynamics of being a church at the heart of the city is that you can have a pretty wide range of things going on because we're on the public plaza. It's like a cathedral.
We open our doors to a lot of community groups.
One of the remarkable areas of responsibility with my job as church administrator is to schedule over 100 events a week sometimes.
So we're a gathering place. So we're a sanctuary for sure in the city as a worship place, but also a sanctuary for everyone in the city, anyone who's passing by. The doors are open, people can come in.
This church grows out of a tradition of what's referred to as the social gospel. We feel a responsibility to the community around us, and we feel a responsibility to advance and model the things that really carry out, the mission that is part of our religious life. So rather than simply turn inward and look to spiritual things, we're trying to look outward. We're trying to make a difference in our community.
The church's programs regarding the homeless ministry and the tutoring project work hand in hand with our attitude, our thoughts and beliefs concerning social justice, economic justice.
I wear a cross around my neck, and at various times in my life I have worn this cross, and at other times, honestly, often long stretches of time, I have not. That is because the meaning of the cross shifted for me. It went from being something very beautiful and empowering to something very hateful and mean-spirited and painful. Now, a few years ago, I put this cross back on because once again, the meaning of the cross shifted. It changed. It now was a symbol of love and of hope. So that act of reclaiming the cross, of returning to the cross, was due in no small part to our Methodist hosts. They helped restore my faith in Christian community and in a Christian left. Malik and I set out to create a theater company that would tell the stories of Asian Americans and Middle Eastern Americans. We wanted to tell universal stories through a specific lens. And so we took the historic Silk Road and we used it as both a geographic guide and a metaphor for polyculturalism.
Silk Road Rising exists because an organization like us has not existed before. Asians and Middle Eastern Americans have been in this country for generations, and yet there really was not a platform where we could see ourselves.
When I first heard that Silk Road Theater at the time had come in, it's like, of course, is very interested in working there, and also seeing it succeed because the city needs that. This is a tremendous theater city, and that we hadn't been able to really get that going. I felt a huge stake in that. I remember thinking specifically, these are the right guys at the right time for this theater. I think this is it.
We've heard a lot of people talk about how not many people go to the arts. Well, why don't they? Maybe they don't go because they don't see themselves reflected.
I've been involved with Silk Road since I moved here in 2006, and frankly, all the theaters that I auditioned at, after every audition, they would always say, "Have you heard of Silk Road Theater?" And I had never heard of Silk Road Theater at the time. It's one of the few theaters, if not the only theater in Chicago that's taking Asian and Middle Eastern authors, actors, etc., and putting them on the forefront.
Asian Americans and Middle Eastern Americans need to be telling our own stories. We need to be representing ourselves, but we also need to be speaking to the broader community. This is not some cultural ghetto. Our theater is for everyone. When the fifth generation German American sees herself in the story of a Japanese immigrant, that's when we are succeeding.
I think that my perception came to reality when I finally went to a play. When I watched the people go to the play, come out of the play, and discuss at intermissions of the play what it meant to them.
Quite often people will approach churches to say, will you buy a block of tickets for this or a benefit for that, and that's all well and good. But when you began to talk about what was inspiring this effort, given again, I'm thinking about the attack at 9/11 and then the resulting incomprehension by Americans of who are the people of the world, how do we understand the social, the political, the cultural contexts that we've just been hit with. And as the two of you were talking about it, I thought this is an inspired way of trying to address a much deeper issue.
I think that in hosting an arts group where you are hearing stories that are challenging to you, stories that make you reflect on the world, stories that make you expand your mind, stories that make you question your beliefs, those all lead to strengthening your character and strengthening your faith.
And that's why I've talked about you and Malik as being second responders to 9/11. We know the story of the first responders, and now what? What do you do next? Your theater is right there at that intersection where we have to hear these stories, otherwise we're going to tear each other apart.
Face it, churches and theaters, we're both in the business of storytelling. We use stories to discover and uncover truth. We're evangelists. We both believe in the transcendent power of our work, believe that we can elevate the human condition.
I was raised Hindu, going to a Hindu temple, which has kind of a practice that's very different from that of attending a church. And I don't often have the opportunity to go to a church space, and so the idea of seeing art within this space was always very intriguing and very interesting. I'm always comfortable in a place where art is being shown or presented, so that was sort of my way to enter. But then once I did, I realized that this place is also for me, which is something that I think I may not have felt before. I may not have known that. And it really took coming regularly to see these theater productions here to feel like it's my home also.
I think Christianity and secular theater sort of move, at least to the non-observant eye, in parallel universes.
How do we reveal the truth of ourselves to one another if it's not in storytelling, which in church terms is what we do in worship every Sunday, is we tell a story, which happens to be a Silk Road story. I mean, you really don't understand the Christian scriptures or the life of Jesus until you understand the Silk Road context, the history before and all that's after. But it's very hard for us middle Americans to pick up on that unless we get tutored in it and get exposed to it.
I feel like in my experience as an actor and my experience as a playwright, theater is a place where people gather because we need something. And I feel like the place that they meet, the theater, you know, actors in the light and the witnesses in the dark, so to speak, it's really a place between worlds.
For me, when I first came, I got the understanding that Silk Road Project, Rising Now, had been here for a while, opening up the door to theater for people of the Silk Road. When I looked across those who were seated here, I thought immediately this is what God wanted for the world.
I love that when I come to see a Silk Road Rising show, I enter the space and I'm going to see art, and I pass the sanctuary where there are a number of people who are looking to have a connection with God. And we're both in this space trying to have a spiritual experience, actually. So there's something really beautiful about that. I think it's actually, that in itself is an artistic experience. I love that such a range of people can be in one building to have kind of seemingly totally different purposes, but actually what we're doing is in a way kind of the same.
If there is a thematic thread or a narrative arc that binds Silk Road Rising to the Chicago Temple, it's the desire for justice.
This cross symbolized what was a KKK Klansman cross burning in Tougaloo, at the Tougaloo College in Jackson, Mississippi, in 1963, where Reverend Ed King was attempting to integrate white churches. During that time of the struggle and the fight to do this integration, the Ku Klux Klan decided to burn a cross on the front of his lawn. But rather than to be intimidated by it, Reverend Ed King, he affixed to it this figure of a very mutilated and distressed Jesus figure who was African American. And then he took it and used it and brought it around to segregation rallies to put forth what it is that was important, and that was a cross that meant intimidation and fear. It became a symbol of life and an understanding that those who died and were mutilated like that died not in vain.
The Methodist Church has a great history of social justice. And I think that's how Silk Road Rising fits in with the church and with the community.
Social justice in the sense of living out what we have been taught about kindness, about selflessness, about doing unto others as you would have them do unto you.
I think one of the reasons that the Chicago Temple thought it important to provide a space, a home for Silk Road Rising, was to try to dispel some of this fear of our neighbors.
You know, we're living at a time when there is great distrust between Christians and Muslims. And we are an example of how a Christian church is hosting an institution, although we're not a Muslim institution, but the fact that I'm Muslim and that we tell Muslim stories in our theater, I think sets a great example for what interfaith dialogue can look like. And the value of coming together, helping each other overcome distrust by hearing each other's stories and giving voice to the expressions of our cultures and our aspirations. It's true bridge building.
So social justice tears down the barriers of our normal construct and says, let's just start with the premise that we're all people and we all deserve the basic rights.
Malik and I have made several commitments. One of those commitments is to combat anti-Arab and anti-Muslim racism. We want Islamophobia and Arab bashing to end.
The connection with Silk Road, this was really an emphatic kind of statement that we're for cooperation, we're for mutual understanding, we're for connecting with people who are being treated badly in our society.
If we as Christians fail to step up in these situations that cry out for some community participation, then in a sense we are withholding the divinity from being involved in these issues. In a sense, we bring humanity of our faith into those situations.
This church has always been about inclusion of all people, of various backgrounds, is open to people of all ages, nations, races, sexual orientation.
You can't just hate an entire group of people and call yourself Christian.
The First United Methodist Church at the Chicago Temple has a statement of inclusion that begins with the line, "We welcome all people to the life of this congregation." A few sentences in, it reads, "Holding to that belief, we welcome and encourage all persons, including persons of all sexual orientations and gender identities, in every aspect of our Christian life together."
As they say, Sunday mornings is the most segregated time in the history of this country.
I remember the first time Malik and I were attending a service at the church, and I came across that statement in the church bulletin, and I couldn't take my eyes off of it. I read it, then reread it, then read it again and again. I'm nudging Malik, have you seen this? Reading those words had a profound impact on me. Here we were, sitting in a church that not only welcomes gay people, it welcomes us as gay people. That, to me, is authentic Christianity.
It's a very realistic understanding of what matters of first importance and what doesn't. And in the United Methodist denomination, to be a reconciling congregation is to really be in a minority voice over against the denomination about trying to move forward on issues of inclusion.
We're a gay male couple, we're not Methodists, we're not doing quote-unquote Christian theater, and yet here we are.
Another, I think, really beautiful example of the generosity of this church is it's not just hosting us as an institution, but it's really taking care of us as individuals as well. One of the most difficult periods in my life was losing my mom, my best friend. And I remember it was during Easter, and the church and the church congregation went out of their way to include her in the service. They got flowers in her honor. They listed her in the program book. It meant so much to me that a place where I don't pray as a Christian would recognize my pain and honor me and my mom.
I grew up in a Presbyterian home. My father's a Presbyterian minister. Frankly, ever since I can remember, from the moment I was able to, they were taking me to church. So basically, the whole church atmosphere was always a part of my life. When I'm on stage and I'm saying a monologue, it's always between me and God. And it's always these moments where the audience disappears. Not 100%, because I'd be lying if I said that.
Yeah, I feel there's a huge spirituality both to me and to my work. As an actor, you're creating characters. And what I've always done is sought to find the truth in every moment of the character. And that moment by moment builds a life, a person, a character. And that truthfulness, again, it goes back to spirituality. If your spirit is been cramped or bent, the freer it is, you are able to find that truthfulness.
Not far from Athens is this theater in a place called Epidaurus. It's the theater at Epidaurus, and it is actually the ruins of a 4th century BC theater. But it's within this extraordinary community of buildings and things which we were told was a healing sanctuary. This theater is next to what was a hospital. The two buildings had these rampways and things that were connected because it was believed that the plays were therapeutic for the people that were in the hospital, that were not well, and that it was part of their rehabilitation. This idea of theater and healing, ritual and experience, sacred and art came together for me.
To truly have peace in the world, we have to know each other. We have to understand where other people are coming from. We have to know your stories as well as our own stories in order to make this world a better place. We cannot continue on the path that we've been going. We can't just talk to ourselves and just get the information that we already know or agree with. We have to open our minds and our eyes and our hearts to see what else is happening in the world, to see where other people are coming from.
It's very much, to me, sort of a part of a peacemaking ministry.
I want to make sure that the congregation at First United Methodist Church knows how meaningful their gift is to us. To them, it might have been a basement in which we are operating, but to me, it is our home.
This is home for me. Every time I come into this place, I relax. I feel like a guest at other theaters, let's just put it that way. Here, though, I'm very much at home.
Could we have ever imagined that a Methodist church would invite us to become their theater in residence smack dab in the heart of Chicago's downtown theater district?
I'm surprised at how privileged and blessed I am. You know, I've always felt very lucky and blessed, and it's very interesting how in this household, you know, it really does come together tremendously for me.
I'm awed by the opportunity we as a church, me as a church member and a staff member here, to have with this quality organization and its relationship to our church. I'm excited about what I offer to the relationship and the opportunity to be a part of Silk Road. I want to be a contributor. I want to be an enabler of more people seeing what you have to offer. And this is a very special place to have that happen.
One of the most riveting memories I have from those startup days was after one of the performances of 10 Acrobats, which was about a Muslim college student. After the performance, everyone left except there was one woman crying. And I, as a good pastor, go over to anybody who cries and says, "May I help you?" Well, she just said, "I've never seen myself portrayed on stage before." And I thought, okay, this works.
There is something inspiring in the partnership between a church and a theater, and the inspiration is in the overlap.
We're glad you've been with us today for this special edition of Sanctuary on the Silk Road Rising Theater Company inside the First United Methodist Church Chicago Temple. Your thoughts and reactions to issues and ideas at the intersection of life and faith are important to us, and we want to hear from you. Email us at gcbm@ameritech.net, visit our website at gcbm.org, and write to us at Sanctuary, the Greater Chicago Broadcast Ministries, 77 West Washington Street, Chicago, Illinois, 60602. That's Sanctuary, the Greater Chicago Broadcast Ministries, 77 West Washington, Chicago, 60602. I'm Lydia Talbot. Thanks for keeping faith with us today on Sanctuary. May peace be with you.